am an actual RevOps person where I do own marketing and sales operations and what would be customer expansion sort of support. I think like anything that we would do or any company does, it's always a journey. I think a lot of times leadership is like, but I want to see results 2 days from now, which is never a reality. So like our jobs as leaders is to really highlight like how we're going to get there, timelines, when we look at results and how we pivot based on those results, like really baking that part out so that there's clear communication and there's not an expectation that tomorrow we're going to have like pipeline for days that came from, this individual.
Allie, welcome.
Hi, it's great to be here.
Thank you so much for joining. And I want to talk about something that I think half of the marketing community right now is very mindful of. Fixing everything in 90 days when you move jobs. I mean, the job market has changed. I mean, we loved AI till AI started replacing us in some places, perceptionally or realistically. And this change is pretty much, it's like orange is the new black.
100%.
So, Allie, would you do us the honors? Do an intro, let our audience know what you do, what you've been up to, and then we will go into the topic.
Yeah. So I have roughly 20 years of experience in marketing for tech companies. I've worked for Health Catalyst. I've worked for Cornerstone, Rackspace. I've been in leadership roles in all of those companies. I'm now with Pluralsight. We are an education platform, so we upskill your technical teams with relevant content around AI, security, cloud, all of the technical things that are going on in the world right now. Love being back in the upskilling space. But my bread and butter has been ops for the most part. I did come in through demand gen, like a lot of people do, and then realized that how important the systems and the reporting, the data is. And I just kind of gravitated to that because I like being grounded in facts and reality. And I just felt like, I don't know, my brain kind of works like a Marketo smart list. I'm always like in database mode. So that's been my bread and butter. And so now I'm leading marketing ops at Pluralsight, and it's exciting because we're going through a big transformation with the market and the world and leading the charge on it, and I love it.
I feel like that transformation is just true description of what's happening within the marketing industry at large. With all of the changes, I think the stats that I shared on LinkedIn across different roles, I just did some digging, right? For demand gen, the average tenure today, may change tomorrow, but today is between 12 to 18 months, right? A very short tenure. And it's not because the person is not good, it's because the industry moves so fast, companies move fast, M&As are front and center, all of this stuff, right? The market is just going crazy speed. In ops, that tenure is between 2 to 3 years. You go into analytics, maybe that's a little bit 3 to 4. And to me, this ability to develop a skill set to start over and kind of get your cheat sheet, get your checklist, and get things in order, because clearly they did not bring a new person in because the last one was amazing. Probably that last person left with certain things that were deferred maintenance and didn't receive loving tender care. So now you're there to fix it and kind of give us that lay of the land of what you have seen when you start a new place, things that you have to scope in and figure out fast.
Yeah, I think the big one, that lead life cycle, to me, that is like bread and butter, number one. If that isn't functioning well and you don't know where all of your customers, prospects are in the life cycle journey with you, it is really hard to do any sort of reporting. So I do usually start there because it is an indicator of systems processes, but also people processes that might be broken. And then when you get into the tech stack, when I get the budget, I'm always like, day one, can I see the budget? What are we spending on everything? And what is our tech stack? That to me is also a big indicator because I've been around long enough to know roughly what tools cost, what we should be spending, what best in class tech stacks look like. So going under the hood and seeing what's in place, why we're using it, and what we're spending on it is also like part of my 30-day journey, right? What's going on there? Audience and targeting. Can we actually target, and do we have the right segmentation in the database to do that? Not only in like how we're connecting to ad platforms, but just in your database in general, how you're nurturing leads, how you're continuing to mine that database, and know that one, you've got the right segmentation for advertising and for your campaigns, but also for how you're going to go report out on it. So those things are really big for me. And then unreliable data. Yes, the where are the bodies buried? Where do we need to go uncover where there's some broken process or some system or tool that is causing chaos with your go-to-market systems? Internal tools that are connected that maybe are doing things that are making it really difficult for you to have clean go-to-market systems and views on what's happening in your database and in your marketing and sales systems. So this little graphic you have here is perfect because that is exactly my 30 days of like walking in and trying to just understand what's going on under the hood.
And you know what's crazy, and maybe I'm the only one who has experienced that. But a lot of organizations, you join them, but they don't really know who their ICP is. They
Mhm.
think they do. And then I've been through many exercises within the first 90 days when these questions keep coming up, and you're like, why are they talking about it so much? Asking for
Yeah.
reports and deal sizes and separation between salmon and whales sometimes, big ones and small ones. Are we selling too much to the little guys and then it's too expensive to maintain them? Like all of that to me is also one of the things to uncover early on, because again, nobody's going to care that you're targeting ICPs that were ICPs at the time when you set up all of the programs. They'll change their mind, but without alignment, you will never know.
Yeah, that is real. Look, one of the things, I think there's two different approaches when you come into a company. You have to assess where they are in their journey too. Are they established? Do they have already strong processes and like a strong product and know what product fit in the market is? Or are they going through a transformation? And I tend to join companies that are going through transformations, probably because it's exciting, right? There's a lot of things to either fix or optimize. Um, but I tend to join companies that are going through some big, changes within who they sell to, what their product is even what their product offerings are, what needs they're solving for. And so that always takes a whole new architecture to be able to power that go-to-market engine. So I get excited by those things. It's a little harder when you walk in and it is complete chaos and you're trying to change. Like it wasn't established to begin with, and on top of that, we're going to throw in all of this change. Like we're going to do a bunch of acquisitions. That was my life at Health Catalyst was all acquisitions. Cornerstone, we had a giant acquisition on top of very dirty systems, old Salesforce instance. Like they were one of Salesforce's first customers, and in 2019 when I joined, they still had their original instance. So imagine seeing routing rules that the CEO wrote back in like the early 2000s still showing up there. So that uncovering all those things is fun, and then fun for me anyway. I like it, but it does take a lot of alignment, and it's a lot of cross-functional work to get those things in place and to understand like what is the go-to-market strategy so that your systems can support that. It's one of the things that I just impress upon my teams all the time. When we build for scale. We have to be able to be nimble because these changes are going to happen all the time. What we're doing this year from a go-to-market perspective is likely not what we're doing next year because the world is just changing that fast. Regardless of the business you're in, the world is changing so fast. That means who we sell to, why we sell to them. Like the introduction of AI has just like gone poof and like blown everything up from the way that we've always thought about things. So we've got to still, that it doesn't change that your foundational systems have to be operational and working in a way that's nimble to address those changes.
So I feel like sometimes that's what you care about. That's what I care about. But the number one ask from the leadership, and I lived that life where I'm not going to name the names, but I joined an organization, and literally 2 weeks in, the ask from my boss comes in. So what are we going to measure? And a legitimate ask, where are we going? But what that person didn't know at the time is that during my interviewing process, somebody told me, hey, our Salesforce is squeaky clean. I'm like, wow, never heard that one before. I wonder what it looks like. And I joined, and it's truly squeaky clean because somebody downloaded a huge 100,000 record plus public database into their Salesforce, creating custom objects and just trying to fit that table in a way that would, reside in Salesforce. And the organization wanted to do account-based marketing, but not a single one of those 80,000 companies or 75,000 companies or account records had a domain attached to it. And here we are setting out to do account-based marketing. So needless to say, the reason I'm sharing this anecdote, my 30, 60, 90, what they thought would look like, ended up looking completely different because I couldn't even start. Like the ship was taking on water. And I'm kept in nice clothes and, looking pretty.
Yeah.
And I'm the one with a bucket trying to make it work.
Yeah. So I just passed my 90 days here, and I walked into goals that were set for me. And I've been sort of decompressing them and being like, okay, I totally see that we need new attribution models. Okay, we need to change the way that we're thinking about how we're measuring marketing. Cool, cool, cool. And it turns out that like a lot of these things were already being solved before I came in by certain teams. So things that I think some of those goals that were set as I walk in, and like these are goals that like went all the way up to ELT, don't even exist anymore, or not, should not be the focus. And so I'm in a process right now of redefining what those goals are so that we can be aligned on what we can fix and what we need to change so that we can be a better, more nimble organization altogether. So I do think that that's a big part of like, what are you establishing, like my goals for my team, but also like what are the marketing team's goals? And if they don't align with best practices now, can we get in place? And the way that I position it is we can start working on ways to address that in the next year for like 2027 if we want to change what our number one, like our key performing metrics are. If we want to change those, let's set that goal for 2027 to make that different. We're going to continue writing what's going on right now and then building for that 2027 year. And so it's being able to identify the problems. That's what I think in ops anyway, in your first 90 days, it's uncovering what's really wrong and then trying to make a plan to address it that also addresses everything that's happening in the future of the company. It's not easy. I would say there are some basic things that you always go look at, but it's understanding the company dynamics, the company goals, and like where strategically where we're going. If we're changing audiences, if we are offering a totally different product to a whole different segment of the market, like how does that fit into whatever goals were already in place for you? And then how do you adjust that to make that clean?
And I feel like figuring out what you start is one of the hardest things.
Yes.
I mean, it would be a very personal share for me to mention that, but I will share anyways. I've been in situations where I walked in and so many things are missing or broken or done backwards, or I would start getting anxiety. I'm like, oh my gosh, I couldn't sleep. I could only think about all the things that needed to be done. And it's true that things needed to be done, but certain things take priority. So how do you set those priorities?
So for me, I do think too, marketing's in an interesting position. When I ran RevOps at Health Catalyst, I owned end-to-end go-to-market systems, which was Awesome. It didn't live in like a centralized team. Everything was sort of, lined up for us in our control, which makes things so much easier and you can work so much faster. Every other company, including Pluralsight, has their their sales force managed outside of go to market. Like it's a business operations team that manages it. There's a centralized analytics team. So it's not just that you're not in control of it to be like, I can fix these three things super fast, especially because all of it takes coordination across all of these teams, right? So I look at the things that are completely in our control to change. How do let's prioritize those things first so that we can either build some efficiencies within our teams and how fast we can move, that we can track or deploy things better for reporting. And then it's something that I know that we can do in a matter of weeks versus are we on their roadmap? They've already got their Q2 roadmap locked. So now this is going to have to push out to Q3 because we've got to wait on that team to be able to fit the work in. So it's what is in my scope of control first, and then what do we build out as part of a roadmap plan?
And when it comes to communicating that out, I think I shared before this, before the live session, my personal experience where in one of my previous roles, actually, that's the squeaky clean Salesforce instance, that sucker ended up having 22,000 duplicates for leads. And I forget how many were account duplicates, right? So I'm like, I'm going to make this my mission every Saturday morning, just for a little bit before the kids get up. I'll just go and do some, run some rules in Ringlead to do lead to account mapping, to do deduplication. And after 2 months of that exercise, when I presented my findings, I'm like, look at this amazing stuff. Nobody cared because that was not a win for anyone other than me. So how do you communicate things that will be considered wins by others?
I talk about the business impact, right? Like doing this thing is going to make us move way faster as far as like building campaigns out. It is going to help us see this impact on revenue differently. It is going to help us build rapport with like the BDR team because now we are passing over or defining leads differently and like the tiers that we're passing over to them. It is going to impact XYZ. When you can tell what the impact is and that impact matters to the audience that you are showing this to, then you get all the buy-in in the world. One of my first big wins usually at a company is how am I going to save you money? Because right now you're spending X amount of money on tech. Look at where these contracts lie. I can tell you right off the bat what we can probably cut out of them or what we can work towards to cut out on the next renewal. So within a year or two, you will see this amount of savings coming out of this team that we can either pocket or redeploy somewhere else. Those things, that's music to a leader's ear. You're going to save me some money. We can maybe go get another resource with it, or we can give it back to the business. Like that is a big win all the time. So if you can take a look at that tech stack and be like, we can cut here, we can cut this, that's always a huge win. So I think that, when you build that credibility, it's about showing what the value is to the business of what you're doing versus just that you're going to clean some stuff up.
Money talks, doesn't it?
It always
I feel
does.
like it talks in the world of AI too, now that the pricing conversations are front and center, but we're not going to go there. You guys can all read them in. So when you turn your output into the language of revenue, you automatically get the ear of sales. If it's on the demand gen side, you get the ear of CFO or COO, whoever is running the internal operations and distribution of budget. The problem with all of that is time. Have you ever run into conversations of like, how long will this take and what the world will look like by the time this is done?
Oh yeah. A lot. That's always like my current CMO, who I really adore her. Her thing is like, who's in charge? Like who's leading this? What or who's responsible for this? Who's the name? What's the time frame? When are we delivering this? Like that is her question every single time we show up with, hey, we want to do a thing, or this is what I recommend we do. Who's going to do it? What's the time frame? So I always get that. And scoping that can be very hard in the ops world. In the demand gen world, depending on how nimble your systems are or what you're actually trying to deploy, like you don't like if you want to go do ABM and you don't have an ABM tool, what does that even mean? And you need time to go get that, set that up, and potentially like onboard a whole new tool versus what can you do without that tool in the meantime. So like having those timeline conversations and saying like this is the immediate impact we can do, and then this is what is long term, and this is why I think it's going to take this long. And you may be totally wrong. You might be able to move faster because maybe once you get under the hood and start working with somebody, you realize it's not as hard as it was to build this out, or they actually have a hole in their roadmap or in their Q2 priorities. Something shifted, so maybe now there's more room for the Salesforce team to go build something for you. So there's an immediate impact. Like I always try to figure out like what is the immediate thing that we can do to either resolve or push this forward, and then what is the full scope of the impact of it.
As we think about kind of these early conversations, before you have credibility, because you're a new leader, you kind of join on borrowed trust. People don't know you, they give you the mandate, and they're hopeful that they hired well and you will do it. I feel like the people element is super, super important because what marketing does not very good day in and day out is marketing itself. And then you double click into that. You look at marketing analysts, marketing operations people, the technical side of marketing, people who are interested in making things work and too invested in building, they deprioritize communications and, tooting their own horn. But it's important, especially within the first very short amount of time. So kind of walk us through these immediate things that you pay attention to.
Yeah. I go on a deep listening tour, right? I meet with all of my teams. I meet with the teams that we service, and I listen to what they're telling me about the um, the issues they're running into, the challenges they're having, and where they need help moving something forward. So getting that trust through the initial listening phase, I think, is really, really important. Um, Being empathetic to what's going on and then offering like quick wins or quick I shouldn't say quick wins because I don't know that there's ever really quick wins in ops. If
Well,
I'm
we
really
package them as such. Remember, branding is an important part of
Yes.
marketing.
But what I think is like what is low hanging fruit that we could address really quickly and help like unblock something for them. Because what I find a lot of times, especially in the ops piece, there's something they've been struggling with and they didn't have a leader that could advocate for them. And so it's like, how can I go advocate for something that's been an absolute blocker for you and open that door so that we can maybe make some headway on it? And why do we need to do this thing so badly? Like uncovering that and doing that for people when it comes to the people and culture piece, I think that's the biggest win that you can do in the very beginning is open up doors and make sure that they know that you are their advocate and that you are here to help and build them up.
And then I want to move on to this piece right here, where you join a new company, especially if you are in charge of the real estate that was given to you and you just hate everything. It's normal because it wasn't built by you. It doesn't pass your taste or sniff test. I remember I had a boss. She like one of her big things, she wanted to redo the website. Okay. Because I think it's, you join a company, you have a different vision for the brand, you want to redo the website, that's your front door. She hated the old website so bad rightfully so, but she hated it so bad she couldn't start a single meeting without saying, pull up this page on the website. Man, I hate this thing. And it was like her sole focus, even though website's one of the bigger kind of beasts to tackle. Maybe you don't want to do it early on, maybe you want to spend some time. So let's talk about kind of the stuff that can wait, or things that are bleeding money right now, or
Yeah.
bleeding right now.
I think your lead handoff is always like one of your first priorities. Like, are you getting the best leads out of it? Are you, if you're not, what is your qualification for handing a lead off? Maybe you have to address that, because that's not, your MQLs don't really work, or your MQAs, or however your whatever stage of the whole account journey that you're on. Um, Addressing that piece, like, is the quality bad because marketing is not qualifying well to start with? Or is it that you're handing over a lot of things, and somehow BDRs, SDRs, sales, whoever is you're handing it off to, isn't picking it up? Is there something broken in the process where it's too hard for them to go find those leads and be able to action them? Is there no dashboard that's telling you that they're meeting their SLAs? Like, what is the problem that might be contributing to that? There's kind of some simple, I shouldn't say simple, but there's probably easier wins there to be like, we could fix this process pretty easily if you just align with those leaders and get those in place. I think ad spend and targeting wrong geos and audiences is a little bit harder, because you're really trying to zero in as to why your ads aren't performing, and that can be happening for so many different reasons, let alone spend and targeting. So that takes a little bit of more of a deep dive. Data hygiene is always a problem. Like, every company I've ever been to, there's no one that has perfect data. Some of them have better data than others.
No, we all own data, and we're all responsible, and we're very data driven. Not everyone.
You hear that everywhere. One of the things that made Health Catalyst an interesting place to work, and different for me, excuse me, is that our TAM was very small. We were healthcare, so we were selling to um, hospital systems, and really mostly US based. So that really keeps the TAM very small. That means your systems are small. You don't have a huge database of people you're going to. Your account, I think we were only working with like 20,000 accounts, like, total for the TAM. So that made maintaining those systems a lot easier. And the data hygiene became easier when we brought in a few tools to help organize and orchestrate all of those things for us. That part was not ever the issue there. Every other place I've worked, it's been global, and it's been, you can target any kind of business with our solutions. So you've got this random mix of accounts that are like, from the Coca-Colas and Nikes down to these little itty bitty baby SMB companies. And then how do you prioritize that account hierarchy? And so those are always those big questions, and those hard to solve questions, because there is not one company in the world that is providing a data structure for how accounts should be structured. So those understanding where the bad hygiene's happening and how you can address it really quick, those quick wins in that is really good to identify. I do think that things that can wait, um, all of the things that you have listed here, yes, the things that are like an output to some of these things that are in the fix now piece, that's true, right? Like, they're an ugly email template. I mean, we've all seen ugly email templates, or templates that are not in best practices. They're
And
still getting the
sometimes
message
we
out.
work just fine. Somebody gets it and still registers. That's the
Yes,
irony of it.
yes, yes, for sure. But you'll go in and get to those things in a minute. But the things that are critical to the way we show and deliver revenue and deliver opportunities to sales, I think, is like the critical ones to identify first.
And I feel like some of the kind of the paradox element here is that many things that have to be fixed now that essentially lay the foundation of how everything else will work, all the things that will be visible, these things are invisible. Good luck going and explaining data strategy without putting someone to sleep or making them yawn. Like to them, it doesn't exist. They don't see it. That means it doesn't exist. It's like for those of you who have a cat, you put a tennis ball in front of the cat and the cat hides behind the tennis ball and thinks that the cat is invisible, even though you can see the body and the ears and the tail, but the cat
Yeah.
behind the tennis ball, right? I feel like a lot of that happens with these more technical, more in-depth, more specialty driven areas that are so instrumental, but they're all part of the infrastructure of go to market
Yeah.
motions. And nobody wants to talk about infrastructure.
No. And it's very hard when you have leaders in marketing that aren't technical. Like when you have, say, a CMO that's been a brand CMO forever and doesn't really deeply understand the demand gen side and all of the technical pieces that go into delivering that revenue to sales.
You'll be doing templates.
Oh, all day long. And templates, and you'll be doing tons and tons of decks to tell your stories. But selling the work that you have to do to those people, that takes a skill of one of the things that I've developed over time is my ability to um, find a metaphor that speaks to them in a simple way. I tend to always use food because I cook all the time and I love to cook and eat food. Like I'm a foodie and everybody eats food, right? Everybody has to eat. So they understand things when you like talk about data, like in terms of a recipe, or if you talk about putting something together that gives you this other outcome, the way that you would cook a full meal and you have order of operations to go into. So I'll start breaking things down in ways that they can, in a metaphor that they can understand to help them really understand what I'm trying to tell them about why we can't see the level of reporting they want or why their campaigns aren't successful because we aren't targeting the right people because we don't have the right segmentation. Those things are really important, and I think when you get into a marketing ops leadership role, that's one of the things that you have to be able to hone as a leader is breaking down that technical thing that you're doing in a way that the company executives that maybe aren't technical can absorb and understand.
I love that. Speaking about communications, and I'll build this out. Um, I talk about data hygiene in terms of Brussels sprouts and broccoli, a really hard sell, especially for those of you with toddlers. I'm sure the pediatrician told you have to offer the same food at least 6 times before they take it. But
Yeah.
it's getting to that 6 times that's the hardest. So that's my analogy. But
Yeah.
let's talk about people's side, kind of getting people to see your side of the story and relating to what matters to you, even though to them it might be just, I don't know, why are we spending time on this?
I think it's interesting because I've been in different companies that were in different stages. And when you walk into a company that's comfortable with where they are, everyone knows there's problems with the data and problems with the systems, but they're still comfortable, like they're still doing their job and they're still hitting numbers somehow and you know, they know it's messy underneath, but they kind of don't care because it's not exposing it in like the results aren't exposing that. Um, that's to me where you've got to tread water very lightly because these people are comfortable. They don't want change necessarily, or they're not expecting you to come in and do big change. They're expecting you to come in and keep the lights on the way it's always been and maybe like optimize here and there. So when you come in big and bold and like, this isn't working, this message is crazy and doesn't resonate with this audience, this system isn't working right, and like the way that you're even um, showing that you are uh, producing revenue or like how you're measuring it is totally wrong. When you come in and tell all those things to people, they're just like put you on guard. And look, I have a big personality. I can come in and be like, everything's broken. And I get a lot of feedback, but like, you can't boil the ocean. And also, like, is anything good? Um, so I think you do have to be careful about your listen first, judge later. And I always I do ask a lot of questions. I'm new. I don't know what's going on. But I also frame it too into like, look, everybody made a decision at some point that drove us here that they thought was the right decision. And it probably was at the time. But today is a different day. So, like, how do we get out of the mindset of holding on to this so that we can move forward and evolve in our thinking? So, I kind of try to position it that way. I love the spotting the builders piece that you have in here and like who's going to help you and who's going to identify the things that are really wrong and can be your advocate to not just like actually going in and doing the bee boops and helping you build things, but who's going to help you plead your case in the best way and get behind you.
There's the other side to the builders too, by the way, spotting them out, like in my experience, right? I mean, I
Yeah.
work with a lot of analysts and a lot of very technical people. Some of them, I kid you not, they're Einsteins. They're brilliant. They're big brain. They don't like arriving. They like being on a journey. That means nothing ships on time. Things never get delivered. They keep on building. And look at this one thing that this one workflow does, right? I feel like everybody's, well, no, I shouldn't say everybody. That's dramatic. A lot of people are converting towards that build mindset with all of the AI tools out there, Claude being the hottest thing in the market for a hot minute, right? But it's almost like sometimes it's looking at it from the other side. It's asking the question, is this the person that will deliver something that passes MCP, minimal viable product, and we can move on? Versus, will this person keep on building and over engineering? And I will
Tinkering.
never plead the case. And the money
Yeah.
will be bleeding.
The over engineering. I mean, I am a very kiss oriented type person. Keep it simple. Special person. I don't want to say stupid. But keep it simple. The more complex you make things, the harder it is to maintain. And so when I'm looking under the hood and what somebody's building or proposing to build, I'm like, that is never going to be able to be maintained and scaled. How do we get the same result without doing this? That is my motto. And when I see over engineering, it like makes my eyes twitch. So I do think that as I'm looking at my teams and what I'm instilling in them is that we are not here to tinker and we are not here to like overthink things. We are here to make things simple and easy for the business to move forward. So I try to instill that in my teams. And then when I'm hiring, I'm definitely looking for people that think the same way as me, that keep it simple, that we aren't over engineering. We can ship things fast. We can make those relationships we need to across the aisle with the RevOps teams and the Salesforce teams and things like that. So I do think that there's a lot of validity in that.
So when it comes to systems and stakeholders, you have the split focus. The team is focused on systems. You're looking at systems. You're aligning stakeholders, the people at the top of the pyramid to give you the time and the money sometimes and the grace to wait a little bit longer, right? Talk about aligning all of these different people, some of them with very nominal, if any, technical background, all probably under the mandate of AI first these days. So it's hard to even convert people back to sanity, but that's a different conversation.
I think, it starts at the leadership level. Like you've got to have buy-in with your peers around what's happening to get done. Because if you don't, then they're aligning their teams in a very different way. And you're aligning your team in a very different way. And y'all are going like this instead of coming together to be right. So I do think it's, and there's give and takes to it, right? Everybody's going to have their own opinions of things and everyone's going to have their own experiences coming in. But I think it's, how do you get what they need and also what you need and, form that trust and that alignment between them. It's a very, like, I can come in hot. I can come in like as a force to be reckoned with, but I have deeply softened over the years based on like just growing and learning, right? Aligning people and getting people behind what you're doing is, such a huge part of what is your challenge coming into a new role. The audit, that's, just as important because while you're aligning these people, you have to know what you're aligning them around. Like what are the things that you have to fix that either they need to wait on, or they can know that it's, we're gonna fix this big pain point for you. Those things, that audit is really important to do that fast. Um, and also, what's actually going to drive a good outcome versus just be something that's nice to have versus
Interesting, but not useful.
right. Yeah, that's a good one, right? Like that's a great thing to not focus on, because that has nothing to do with what the go-to-market strategy is. Um, and then the fix part, right? That's a big one too. Like how do we go in and fix it and make that roadmap of like what is critical, mission critical to what is going to be a meaningful change for the business to fix. And then the build part, I mean, that to me is more like even an optimization. Like once you get these foundational fixes in, then you can start optimizing and doing cool stuff. That part is exciting also, like super exciting when you can get to that stage. But some companies it's fast. Like at Health Catalyst, it moves so fast because I owned it all. And I owned the budget, I owned the tools, I owned the people. I owned, that's such a terrible word. I was responsible for it all. Let's just put it that way. But I owned all, or I was responsible for all of those things. And so I could make the timeline and I could make the priorities based on what I knew the business needed. And even what like maybe the business didn't really know they needed, but I could go and do these things in the background. And all of a sudden we can open up a world of things that we could do that we couldn't do before. Um, it's a little harder when you've got, systems that live in different orgs.
Slow is smooth, and smooth is fast. But boy, does it hurt slowly.
Mhm.
Let's talk about quick wins.
Oh, I hate that word. It's so hard, right? It's so hard when, again, when you aren't the person that's owning the full picture of everything. There are things that, like, again, I focus on the things that are in my scope of control. And then I also start to like for my path of like what we're going to build in the future is how do we undo anything that isn't in our scope of control but could be, so that we don't have to worry about other teams. How do we put those processes in the systems at the front of the go to market process that we own and that we can control for ourselves? Things like segmentation should not be dependent on um, things coming out of like Snowflake, for example, like if you have a big Snowflake instance, or changes that have to be done in Salesforce. Where can we do those things and build those processes in the front end that we don't have to really like depend on another team to help us align those things? So I try to think about things in terms of that way. Um,
You know,
and
one of the most important books that I made my kids read, made a lot of my teammates read early on, is Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People.
yes,
You would say it's the silliest book, but everybody's got their pet thing, which they deeply care about. And if out of a sudden you teach yourself to care about that very thing and you got a story to tell, out of a sudden you got someone's ear, and maybe you could just stuff that bill a little bit and add things that you know are important to you and really matter, but to them they're just noise in the name of that one project, the one thing that they deeply care about. It's almost like that again, the kind of the eloquence and people exercise of
yeah,
marketing what needs to happen, which for technical people could be a challenge.
yeah, agree. Meeting somebody where they are so that they understand what you're meeting, there you're servicing something that's important to them. I feel like that's such a big piece of like the marketing ops, revenue or sales ops alignment that is always kind of a rub, because they are worried about very different things than marketing is. But you are constructing things that are part of their downstream processes. So you have to deeply understand what they need. And they need to align with you on making sure that it meets the criteria that they have too. Those two, that piece to me is like intricate. When I started here, one of the first things I did was meet the sales ops team and make friends with them, because we have to be on a joint mission together. It can't be they're asking for this, I'm asking for this from the same resources that are outside of our orgs. We have to be like joint mission, joint roadmap.
I feel like one of the things that you always have to do during the weekly meetings or however often those are is to talk about things that happen that are important, but unless you bring it up, nobody will ask. I report into CEO. And does he really care that Hitchhiker's Guide to Marketing Analytics won Demand Campaign of the Year award? He truly doesn't, because there's no revenue attached to it. That's how CEOs' brains work. But will I talk about it? Of course I will. And just, fill in the blank, whatever that might be, whatever important initiative you're talking about. Even my lead deduplication effort, I made sure I talked about it, because unless you talk about it, it didn't happen. But now there's visibility and people realize, oh, a huge chunk of their day is taken by this big initiative. And if they're talking about it with big words, it must be big. It's natural human reaction.
Yeah, 100%. Knowing how to communicate what you're working on and the impact it has, that to me is it's a big struggle for ops teams and demand gen teams alike. I just think it's hard for people to pick their heads up out of the weeds and be able to say, I did this thing and this is the impact it had. And that to me is what is important to leaders, that are important for leaders to do for their teams, is to help elevate what they're doing and show that impact and why it's so important to the business.
Let's talk about the one thing that is always important to the business, because every business is in business to drive pipeline. And I would love to hear your take. Like you talked about making friends with sales ops. I mean, on the demand gen or revenue side, we always have to make friends with sales as well,
Yep.
preferably early on. So then you go into the smooth sailing of agreements, right? And I feel like in Mark talk about the funnel. I mean, there's this split in the market. Some think it's no longer it. Others still kind of use the framework. Like, we're not going to go into the weeds, but usually marketers think about the programming that we do to extend our reach, like all the things out there. How do we reach all of our ICPs? Hopefully not pseudo ICPs. But the conversations that matter to people usually start at the bottom of the funnel, at least people in leadership, and what actually drove revenue. And then you fan it out to get the commitment in terms of what big level programming would do. I could probably argue brand is probably, that's how you win commitment to spend on brand as well. Like, I'm curious on your take whether flipping this funnel using the terminus analogy. Oh, these are way back when. But flipping the funnel and talking about what drives revenue as the front and center conversation, and then backing into the math of everything else actually makes sense.
Yeah. I agree. I do think that uh, starting at the bottom and going backwards, I always start personally with anything that we're doing. What does that mean for revenue? Is this something driving revenue? Is this something that's going to impact how we show revenue influence? So I always kind of start there and work backwards no matter what I'm doing, from a ops standpoint, from a marketing standpoint, from a demand gen standpoint. It's, we need to get sales some deals. And what are we doing to drive that? This thing over here, this project that someone has, say, we're doing an internal kickoff or something, and there's a lot of creative that has to go into that. Well, how do you balance that with all of the needs that the teams need to be able to go to market with revenue deals or with things that impact revenue? So I just think that the starting question is, does this drive revenue or not? That's where you just start everything. So whether it's looking at it from the funnel or not, it's just, is this a revenue impacting action? That's where I start my conversations for everything.
And I think that's how you win the sales year too. And out of all teams for marketing, that kind of early proxy with sales to at least be on the same side early on, kind of builds the foundation of staying on the same side. Talk to us, the few minutes that we have left, talk to us about kind of the key takes on what gets the sales team to accept you into their pack.
Oh, if you talk deals, if you talk revenue, if you say that this thing that I'm building you, I forecast that it's going to bring you X amount of new leads and X amount of deals. When you start talking in terms of the revenue impact and the pipeline impact it's going to have for them, that's where you win their hearts and minds. Then you can start backing that into, okay, in order to do that, we have these problems we need to overcome. We need, to be on the same page with, shared definitions. All of these things that you have listed on the slide all starts with, hey, I am doing this so that I can impact your pipeline and make you just as successful or more successful than you are now. When you do that, I think number one, sales is like, I'm here, I'm listening. What do you need from me? I also always ask too, like, where is marketing lacking for you? Like, what are we not delivering right now that you need aside from leads? Are we not delivering pitch decks for you? Are we changing messaging and it hasn't gotten down to a place that sales can really understand and execute on that for you as well? How do we make those connectors better? Like that enablement piece is really big from the marketing side for sales. And I think if you start talking, what's going to impact revenue, and then how are we going to enable you to carry through those programs that we're doing, those to me are the big building trust with sales.
I've been an advocate of transparency in terms of all the things that marketing is doing for the sales team. And I had the misfortune of once giving people too much information and inviting them inadvertently into a conversation of why this MQL has this many points versus this MQL had that many points. And that's when I learned that the less they know about the tactical stuff, how the sausage is made, like we don't need to give them the tour of the sausage factory. So I'm curious about your take on this balance of too much information or just enough, or balancing those questions of like, how do we do that? Now that you explain it's there, what does 200 points for an MQL mean?
Yeah. So I have flipped the script on that. I think scoring is not very useful in determining sales readiness. So I just push us to give them hand raisers, true hand raisers, demo requests. I want to contact sales. I went to an event. I met with somebody. I want to follow up conversation. When you deliver value that way, where it's like this person is ready to talk to sales, here you go on a silver platter. These are the things that they interacted with. This is what we know. We know they want this solution or they're interested in this solution. They could be potentially in these solutions as well, but this is their primary focus. If you can give that transparency and give those solid, ready to have a conversation people to them, that's what they care about. Scoring is they don't care. They don't care about scoring. They don't care about scored leads. They don't care if you think that this is good for a follow up when someone hasn't explicitly asked for it yet. That kind of stuff, that fluff, the overinflated, I'm just going to give you a bunch of stuff, but nothing, like the conversion rate is really low. That's where you get your, sideways with sales. It degrades. I don't know. I'm trying to say a word that maybe I'm saying wrong, but it lessens the and that's just going to start breaking down from that point on. So I do think not telling them about how you're scoring them or how you're getting them to be a hand raiser, like that part shouldn't matter. What should matter is you have a hand raiser. It's a solid lead. They're ready to talk to sales. This is the solution that they are interested in. Go along with that. That's what they care about the most. So I don't think you need to totally tell all your secrets and show all your hands. No.
The tour of the sausage factory stays reserved to new marketing members, but not sales team.
Correct.
All right, let's round this all up. Any last minute takes on everything that we talked about? Again, survival guide, first 90 days, things that you pay attention to, things that you let go for the time being. Any parting thoughts, Allie?
I mean, just try to find the things that are in your scope of control that you can execute fast and do well, and that will have an impact on the overall org and revenue. Like start there. And then from there, you can build out roadmaps and you can build those relationships and really communicate what the vision is for your team, whether it's demand gen, marketing as a whole, if you're like a full marketing leader or an ops person. But triage what's on fire first and put that out, and then everything will fall in place at some point.
Ellie, thank you so much. This has been a fantastic conversation. I feel like these are the tried and true things that stay regardless of the change in the market. So
Yeah.
I appreciate your insights.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree. The foundations don't change. Even we can we can talk AI all day long, but if your systems are trash and you don't have the data to support all of it, you're not going to get outcomes you want anyway. So